Okay, so this week we're looking at gravestones and their meaning. Now, it's important to remember that prior to the late 19th century and early 20th century, that most of the population were illiterate, and that it's estimated at some time before that, as little as between 5 and 10% of the population could actually read and write. So if you were to write somebody's name and a message on a tombstone, it would be relatively misunderstood or not understood by most of the population. So therefore we come to symbolism, which most people from centuries of tradition would understand. If we look at the tombstone in front of us, we can see at the top of the tombstone, if you look closely, that has the initials DB, a love heart and a eroded letter in B, suggesting that these people were man and wife. But more obvious is the plough symbol in front of us. Now, it's in keeping with the village's past agricultural history that the plough symbol should turn up on many tombstones in the graveyard. And if we have a look just behind us, you'll have to look closely here, folks. I think I can come in a little bit. We can indeed see that the plough and the crossbones and the hourglass are all present, and the initials. Now, the plough would remain prominent in this area really until late on, and then the cotton industry kind of took over from that. However, looking at the gravestones a little bit closer, we can see that there's some crossbones here. Now, these normally have like a skull over them, or occasionally have a skull over them, and it's basically a memento mori. In other words, it's a remember to die, which sounds quite sinister, but actually in many ways it means have a good death, have a good life, indeed, because you indeed will end up here like all the rest of us. We are only mortal after all. And rather than being a sinister symbol, I take them to be a kind of mortality symbol of just that, you know, have a good life while you're here. Now, the hourglass at the side of it is a symbol of how long somebody lived for. If the hourglass is straight up and down, it would suggest that the person was to live for a long time. If it was on its side, that they only lived for a short while. So just to prove that point, I'll wander down to a chap's tombstone called William Kearns, who died, he was murdered, and that he lived to be 70 years old prior to his death. But if you look very closely at the bottom, you can see just the top of the hourglass. Now, we know that William Kearns died when he was 70 years old, and that he actually died murdered in Clackmannanshire in a brawl with one John Bloor, who is supposedly hung from the side of Stirling Castle as a punishment. So, if we wander over the graveyard, it's interesting to note that in this plot here, the one that's relatively overgrown, this is the Mercer family tomb area, and that the Mercers were known to have been the stonemasons in the village for the better part of 100 plus years. And that I would imagine that it was the Mercers who actually carved the stones at the top of the cemetery back there, and that they were also known to have carved the tower. If anybody lives in the area, they'll know of Bandrum Tower, and also they were known to have built Bandrum Home in 1834. However, staying with tombstones and the meaning, if we take a little look at this one here, rather an interesting one. Again, we have the mortality symbol, the skull and crossbones, in a different configuration, but we also have a hand on a book, which would suggest that he was a holy man, probably a preacher at one time within the village, and that if we were to wander down a little bit further, taking us back to the point about age and the hourglass symbol on a tombstone. Now, the angel with wings, it looks like they've got them in his head, in his hands here, but it's basically an angel with wings, and that also is a mortality symbol. And if we look down below, we can see that the hourglass is on its side, and what looks like to me a small child. So this would suggest that the person buried here was quite young when they died. Okay, folks, I'm sorry if this one seems a little gloomy, however, it's all part of our history. So thanks very much for listening, folks. Again, get in touch with us, messages, etc, etc. And this is Barry Doyle on behalf of the Saline and District Heritage Society. Thanks for listening again, folks, and we'll see you soon.